Hi, and well, today when I got home from work, I did the video as planned, and then I thought I really ought to do one of the events of the day, so then I did a second one. Looks like I'm doing a third because I had not quite noticed until I saw a little comment that we're up to 5,000 subscribers on the channel. So we should probably commemorate that. Thank you very much, by the way, for subscribing. And what I thought I'd do is first of all just go through a few things, where we've come from, where we may be going to, and then just give a little bit of a self-indulgent story on one of the most important parts of my life. It was very vivid in my mind in terms of what set me on my attitude towards politics, really, as a teenager. So, first of all, I technically started the channel about a year ago, but I was just sort of talking about things. You know, it was always supposed to be like a political, philosophical channel. But I wasn't really putting out regular stuff, like sometimes like a month between them and things like that. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing other than being a gobshite that wanted to talk on YouTube. And then, you know, what happened is later on, I just happened to do one on Brexit. I was doing one on various topics, happened to do on Brexit, and that got a lot of attention. And then towards the end of the year, obviously a few more, as Brexit became more and more newsworthy. In other words, it was always very important, but sometimes events didn't move very quickly. But as we've got closer to it, it's moved more and more quickly to the point where all this year so far, like January and February, I've basically been doing a video every day. I think for the first few days of January, it was an average of one a day. But there were a couple of days when I didn't, but I did two on other days, and it's just how it works out, not an intentional thing. And before you knew it, there's so much to talk about. It was not only one a day, but I started putting polls out to say, well, what do you want me to talk about? Because there's so many topics, I can't even make the decision myself without rolling dice. So, you know, hopefully that's quite good as well. Then someone sort of suggested podcasts. I'm not really into the world of podcasts. I don't understand them. But I found a place to host stuff. So what I've done with videos now for the past few days is created an audio version of them and then put those up onto Podbean or something. I can't remember. But the best way to get hold of those is they automatically get posted up on Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, that's another good reason to do that, because then there's automatic notifications of when those podcasts go out. So for those who prefer that. Now, I am sort of trying to work out how to do with other things in iTunes and things like that. I think I sort of have, and I'm not sure. I don't own any Apple products. So iTunes is a mystery to me. I sort of signed up for it and put something on it, and it says it's now accepted. I don't know what that means. I'll slowly get onto other things, but podcasts are available sort of now. If anyone has got any very useful guides, then feel free to throw those my way as well. And in terms of where we're going to go from this, I'm very well aware of, at the moment, of course, it's very much Brexit. I'm having my Sundays as a non-Brexit day, although sometimes it's very linked because it's just political in general. There will come a time when Brexit initially won't be a daily thing, and then initially won't be a thing at all, or that might be in 10 years' time. Who knows how it's going to pan out. But of course, what I enjoy talking about is politics in general. So, you know, there will just be other topics, such as the poll I've just put out today includes two Brexit topics, because at the end of the day, they keep winning the polls, but also a non-Brexit topic as well. So it's not just that I'm only interested in Brexit. And I've been very interested in politics for a long time. I love talking about it. Thankfully, I have colleagues as well at lunchtime who are talking about it. So, yeah, they'll without missing a step, I will just carry on talking about whatever seems interesting in the world of politics, and not just in the UK, but mostly it will be once the Brexit winds down. But I'm also well aware of the fact that probably what's bringing a lot of traffic here is not only that I am doing a lot of Brexit content, but also that's the thing that people want to find out about. When I move to other topics, I may well be picking topics that are not as popular, so to speak. So we'll have to see how that goes. But, you know, we'll observe that with a bit of optimism at the moment. So, just as a bit of self-indulgence and just to say something vaguely useful, I thought I would describe what is a very important event in my life, which really I think set the store for me in terms of political thinking or my attitude to politics. So just to say where I come from. So I grew up as a young boy in the 80s in a pit village. So for those who know that, you'll instantly know what that means. For those who don't. So this was at the time of the miners' strikes. And although there was no major violence that I ever observed in my particular village, I don't remember camera crews and policemen beating the hell out of anyone there. Nonetheless, it was pervasive. You were very well aware of it. I also grew up in a conservative household. My parents, conservative supporters. But to their credit, you're saying, I'm a Labour supporter. Have I rebelled against my parents? Not really. To their credit, they never forced their political views on me. I was just aware that they had those views. So where my political education began was actually, pre-teen really. And it was watching television programmes like Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister and Spitting Image. And I have to say, quite frankly, satire is not a bad place to begin your political education. Certainly I thought that was actually quite good. But then as I started to get much more interested in politics, I started reading around things. What's really important with anything is critical thinking. The ability to take what someone says and think to yourself, right, do I take them at face value? Have they got some ulterior motive? What's their motivation for saying what they're saying? Does it seem innocent? Does it not? Do I need to find more information? Too many people take things at face value. And because people will tend to seek out echo chambers, it's very easy to do on the internet, but it was also the case, it could have been done years and years ago, even when I was growing up, because people will read a particular newspaper. That newspaper caters to a particular sort of person with a particular sort of bias. And therefore, it's very easy for you to have those views reinforced. And if you were exposed to more points of view, they may not be your views at all. Particularly problematic when you're basing them on things that you believe are facts and are not facts. Now, of course, as a scientist, inevitably, my formal education would have introduced me, as it did, to analytical ways of thinking and carefully considering the conclusions I draw from data, because we can't just say, oh, that seems to be tending that way. We have to be sure and we have to demonstrate that we're sure. But the importance of critical thinking, which I didn't know it was called at the time, actually came to me when I was very young, like 13. I'm going to guess about 13, give or take. So towards the end of the 80s, with the Conservative government led by Margaret Thatcher at the time, they introduced something called the poll tax. Now, I probably should have looked this up before, because when I was young, I didn't really know anything about it, not paying tax myself at that age. But I think basically what it was funding for local government, much as we have the council tax now. The council tax replaced it. There was a lot of opposition to the poll tax, and eventually it was axed. Axe the poll tax, in fact, was one of the slogans, wasn't it? And I think the way it worked is it was a tax on people of like voting age, and people sort of, I think one of the reasons why people thought it was unfair was because, in a poorer household, you're more likely to have maybe more people, and that household will be paying an awful lot of tax, but it gets no more service from local government than maybe somewhere else where it's got one person living in it or a couple of people living in it, and they're paying much less. So eventually it was replaced by the council tax, where the household pays the tax based on the value of that property, or based on what the value was in like 1990 or something. You do get a discount if you're on your own. I live on my own, so I get a discount, like 25% discount or something like that. But generally speaking, no matter how many people are living in a household of that age, that would be taxable age, it's determined by the value of the property. Therefore, those with a higher value property should be wealthier and therefore should be able to contribute more to it. So anyway, as a young lad, I remember being introduced to the poll tax, apart from just seeing it on the news, but that's only little snippets, by a teacher. We had PSE lessons. They were personal, I think, personal and social education. We now have PSHE lessons in schools, where the H is for health. So they show you how to put a condom on a cucumber, for example. Very important. So in these PSE lessons, they used to sort of tell us about things. It was quite good in a way that you could have teachers just sit there and educate pupils on, important matters of the day. But of course, what's really important is the teachers do this in an unbiased way. So I am always very conscious that I am a very political animal. So when I discuss things with students, like for example, this week, particularly, I've done this for a while anyway, but particularly today and yesterday, I've been saying to my students of voting age, are you registered to vote? Without giving them a leaning into what I want them to do. Just say, just make sure you're registered to vote. And by the way, if you don't fancy turning up to a polling booth on a Thursday, you can also register for postal voting as I do. But you need to be unbiased. You can't sort of say, oh, you should vote this way because that's really good and this way would be really bad. But this teacher obviously didn't really agree with that. He explained the poll tax to us in a way that emphasised how it was a fair system. I came away from that lesson thinking, oh yeah, it sounds perfectly fair to me. It all made sense. Everything he said led to the conclusion that it was very fair. Now, I had a friend whose parents were both ardent socialists, like, you know, major supporters of the Labour Party. In fact, his dad was a miner in said mining village, the pit of which, of course, is now gone. It's a huge housing estate. And I remember talking to this lad at his house about it, and his mum was there and overheard, and she said, well, shall I tell you a few things about it? And she explained it as well. And after her explanation, I was convinced that it was most unfair. And then later on, I thought to myself, hang on a minute. These two people have both told me about the same thing. And by the way, I didn't believe any of them had lied to me because on matters of fact, when they were discussing the actual facts of the case, neither of them disagreed with each other. So they were consistent with that. It's just the way they presented the implications was very different. And I thought, hang on, how can I, on the one hand, believe it's fair and unfair when I've been given effectively the same factual information? That's a nonsense. And that was a seminal moment in my life because at that point, without even realising that I was considering critical thinking, I realised the importance of not taking things at face value, of actually questioning things and thinking to myself, okay, the way it's presented me, I'm getting a particular feeling, but I've got one point of view, and trying to distill the facts from the opinions, and potentially as well seeing that it's actually better to have multiple opinions, differing opinions, where they at least all agree on points of fact, because that's helpful, before I actually come to my own conclusions. And that's sort of the way I've been since. Although I'm quite opinionated, I have thought about it a great deal. If I'm given new information, I don't make an opinion on it straight away. I like to sort of digest it. And the other thing, of course, is it is absolutely crucial, I think, if your opinions are going to be worth anything, one, you have to be willing to have them challenged by others. Absolutely have to. And secondly, you have to accept that if you are given some new information, you may change your view, and you have to be comfortable doing that. For example, politicians, it's one thing politicians don't seem able to do, and they're the very people who it's most important to do. You'll hear phrases like U-turns. The phrase, for example, was used about Jeremy Corbyn yesterday. Jeremy Corbyn does a U-turn, which he hasn't really. But the point is, it's used as a term of insult, the fact that you would change your opinion or change your action. But of course, with new information, you should be prepared to do that. It's not a strength to keep stubbornly plodding on with the same incorrect view. In fact, there was a nice little quote in Doctor Who. I was a huge fan of Doctor Who. Not so much of the newer stuff. Well, it's not terrible. It's fairly terrible. But a 1970s one, which is before my time, but still on video later, called Face of Evil. And there's a great quote in it which says, "The very stupid and the very powerful have one thing in common. They don't change their views to fit the facts. They change their facts to fit their views." And that's fantastic. And that also is it's over 20 years since I've seen that, so that obviously must have had an impression on me as well. And that's also really important. So there you go. There's a little something about me and how I sort of developed those thoughts. I'm not going to waffle on and tell you how I then went from being in a conservative household to actually, becoming a socialist first and then a Labour supporter, because it didn't happen at the same time. But I hope you found this part interesting at the very least. Anyway, if you did, don't forget to click the like button. And of course, carry on subscribing, because it'd be nice to get to, 10,000, I suppose, in the fullness of time. We'll see how far we can get by the time Brexit actually hits, when it hits, if it hits. So yeah, until next time, I'll see you later.